Good morning, everybody. Welcome back after your long weekend of whatever it was that you were doing. Welcome to the STEM Lockdown Digital School Grade 10 IT lesson. As always, as I've said, this is Grade 10 Information Technology. My name is Karen Anderson. Before we get started, I'm sure we're all very happy to be back on Zoom. I know that I am, but I need to warn you that you need to keep your cameras turned off. If you turn your camera on, my host will turn it off once. If you do it again, he's going to kick you out of the lesson and you won't be allowed back in. So I'm appealing to you as a bunch of mature 16-year-olds to please behave responsibly, and let's try and do this in a manner that isn't disrupted by people who are actually just looking for attention. Okay, so once again, now we've got the chat back up. It's real time, so we can get on with our lesson. Okay, so what are we doing today? In the last lesson, so you've had a nice long time to do it, I told you to do the books activity in the Dandelion Delphi book for homework. I also showed you an algorithm that returned what day of the week it was for a specific date. What I've got for you is to show you what the Delphi code looks like for that algorithm, just so that you can see how you would turn an algorithm into a Delphi program. Then we're going to have a look at multiple conditions in if statements. Now, you'll be able to see when we go through that the in operator takes care of a lot of that, but it's still good to know, because if you're not just dealing with numbers, you're going to have multiple conditions. And then we're going to look at case statements. And a case statement is the ordinal data type replacement for the in operator and also for the Nestedif. Okay, Wilfred, I see your camera's on. You need to turn it off, please, because if it comes on again, you're going to be kicked out. Right, so here is the homework activity that was on page 63. I'm briefly going to go through what it was that, sorry guys, I'm just trying to minimize the camera view here because it's getting on my nerves. Okay, so briefly go through the question. So you were told that you needed to click on the book sales menu option and you had to retrieve the number of books sold which was entered by the user in an edit. Then you had to calculate the profit using the constants that were already declared, and then display whether the person made a profit, broke even, or made a loss. So you needed a nested if statement for this. So here was the sample of the output, and here is the code. Okay, so your code, sorry guys, I'm having to move the chat window around so I can see what's going on. You were given constants of a setup cost of 5,000, a cost for printing of 50, and a sales price of 75 per book. So what you had to do was get the number of books from the edits, and then to calculate the profit would have been the number of books that was entered by the user times the sales price. In other words, what are you selling the books for, is going to be your income, for those of you who do accounting, minus the number of books times printing cost. In other words, how much is it costing you to print them, minus your setup cost. Now, you don't have to know or care what that setup cost is, just how much it is. And then output how many books were sold, which is basically just directly outputting your input. And then your if statement said, if our profit is greater than 0. So in other words, after your calculation, if there's greater than 0 value in our profit, then output the word profit and that variable. Else, if our profit less than 0, then output a loss. In other words, this poor person didn't make any money. Otherwise, because your last option is, okay, they broke even. Okay, so your else statement is then, well done, you didn't earn any money, and you didn't lose any money. Okay, and then again, the last step would be outputting a blank line, which we've done lots and lots of times. So there's the solution to that activity. If you did it, I hope you did it, you can check whether you did it correctly. Okay, moving on. All right, I see somebody's raised their hand. Please just type in the chat so that I can answer you. Okay. Right, then you remember this one. This was the algorithm that I did with you last week. And it was to tell you which day of the week a certain date was. And we used the 14th of February 2021. So the algorithm said, get the 4-digit year, the month number, and the day number. So in this instance, we've got 3 edits, and that's where we get Y, M, and D. Okay, so I was naughty here. I didn't use my normal naming conventions. Okay. Oh dear, you took screenshots of the activities, came back an hour later and couldn't find them. Oh dear, they're up there now, Silex. Okay, so if you go onto the YouTube channel, all the videos, all of them from last week are there, but now you've seen the answer. But don't look at the answer that carefully, just try and do it anyway. Okay, right, so back to this one. There is my input, okay, from my 3 edits, and then I'm just following the algorithm. So if month equals 1 or 2, then increase month by 12 and decrease year by 1. So this is now what I'm going to be explaining to you just now, multiple conditions in an if statement. If m equals 1 or m equals 2, then begin. M gets m plus 1 and y gets y minus 1. So this is the statement that executes this. And then these are the calculations. Okay, and remember what I said to you? There's no times between the 13 and the month there, but you have to put it in your Delphi code. You've got to put the brackets in the same place. And then you had a nested if that goes all the way through if this, else, if this, else, if this, else, if this. And that was then the Delphi implementation of that long, complicated algorithm. Okay, so not really that difficult to turn this into Delphi code. Okay, let's move on. Right, so let's have a look at more than one condition in an if statement. So the first thing that is very, very, very important to remember, and the number of times that I've had people put their hands up in my classes because they've got a problem with an if statement, and it's because they forgot about the brackets. Okay, the brackets are important. The other thing that's important is if you're testing the same variable, you have to say its name again. So here is the correct example. If I_num is greater than or equal to 8 and I_num is less than or equal to 12, then. So I have to say I_num both times, and I have to put brackets around each of my conditions. So here are some examples of where it's wrong. Okay. If I_num is greater than or equal to 80 and I_num is less than or equal to 20 with no brackets is going to give you an error. Okay, this one here, what is less than or equal to 12? Okay, I've told my classes, and I'm going to tell all of you guys as well, you have to be specific when giving instructions to a computer. Okay, so the computer's going to look at this and go, what? Okay, you have to be specific and go, if I_num is greater than or equal to 8 and I_num is less than or equal to 12. Now, this particular example, I'm hoping that at least some of you are looking at this example and going, but we could use in for this. And you are 100% correct. Okay, this example can use in because I could say if I_num in 8.12 and it would do the same thing. But this is just to show you an example, because here we've got another example that uses 2 different variables that I'm checking. And if this was a real value, then I couldn't use in because in only works with ordinal data types. Okay, so I know that this may sound logical, but I need to just point it out to you so that you are aware of it. When you have an and, it means that all the conditions in the if statement have to be true. Okay, so I_num greater than or equal to 8 must equal true, and I_num less than or equal to 12 must equal true. Okay, so if this example here, if I mark is greater than or equal to 80 and a subject equals IT, this is somebody who has a subject IT and their mark is greater than or equal to 80. All right, so Ruben's asked up to how many ands can you use in one if statement? I don't think anybody's ever tested that, Ruben, but if you think about the purposes of your program, I wouldn't go more than about 3 or 4. There must be another way of doing it then. Okay, and remember that sometimes you can replace a nested if or put a nested if in place of an and, depending on what you're trying to do. Okay, so Mark must be greater than equal to 80 and the subject must be IT. So this down here is a truth table. So this is how you would have a look at exactly what the outcome of an if statement with an and is. So if condition 1 is true and condition 2 is true, then your output is going to be true. So the then part will be executed. Okay, for any other eventuality, if the first one is false and the second one is true, the output is false. The then part won't be executed. Same as if you reverse it. Okay, so if this mark was less than 80 and the subject was IT, then the result would be false. The then part wouldn't be executed. Almost like a logic gate, yes. Okay. All right, so important, both have to be true for then to happen. Okay, now we move on to the next one, which is or. Okay, and obviously or is now the opposite, and that means only one of the statements needs to be true. Okay, so if you've got if Mark is less than 80 or the subject equals IT, the then part is going to be executed. So you've got to think very carefully about what the purpose of your multiple condition if statement is when you're actually devising it to determine whether you need an and or an or. Because in this instance, the only time the or is false is if both of them are false. As long as one of the conditions is true, the then part is going to be executed in an or if statement. Okay. Right. Now, brackets are important, and I will explain to you just now in more detail why and how they are important. But just to have a look at these examples here, this if statement will be true for learners with an A for both IT and English, or a learner with an average above 90 because of your brackets. So remember, brackets, just like with maths, force the first part to happen. So this if statement is going to be if IT greater than or equal to 80 and English greater than or equal to 80, or the average is greater than 90. Okay, can you have both an and an or in one? Yes. Okay, and Tila, here you go. There's an example there. Okay, also please note, just as a by the by, and I'm pretty sure I've put it in later in the presentation, and is evaluated before or. So and is like the times of BODMAS. Okay, and I know, and I've said this to my classes, sometimes I use the really like primary school ways of remembering things, but you know what? If it works, then use it. The way that I remember that and happens first is that and starts with an A, which comes before O in the alphabet. Okay, so whatever tricks you need to use to remember this, so be it. So let's have a look at this example here. If we move the brackets, or if we change the and, or the or to an and, then I've got if the IT mark is greater than or equal to 80, or the English mark is greater than or equal to 80. So that's one or the other. They've got to have 80% or more for IT or English, and their average is greater than 90. Okay, so you need to be able to read and understand how the brackets affect these things. Then also remember, and this is important when it comes to answering questions in a test or an exam, we speak differently to the way we write code. Okay, so one day when you get back to school, maybe somebody will make an announcement and they will say all grade 9 and 10 learners may leave early. That's how we speak. Okay, we then know that everybody who's in grade 10 and in grade 11 is allowed, 9 and 10 is allowed to go home. Okay, we say in English, we would use that's right. Okay, so exactly, Sandra, that's exactly it. If we did it in code, we would have to say, in this example, we would have to use or, because you cannot have an if statement that says if I grade equals 9 and I grade equals 10, because nobody is in grade 9 and grade 10. An individual person cannot be in grade 9 and grade 10. So therefore, you would have to write your code as if I grade equals 9 or I grade equals 10, then leave early gets the value of true. Okay, so it's the opposite. Yes, it's the opposite of the way we speak. So you've got to just think about what you're actually wanting your program to produce depending on how the question is phrased. Okay. Oopsie. All right, so as I mentioned before, and is evaluated before or unless you use brackets. So if you look at this example here, if I grade equals 12 or I grade equals 11 and S subject equals IT, then you're going to have all grade 11s who take IT and all grade 12s. So that's what this is going to return, because the bracket is around the second half. It's going to evaluate the and first, which if I didn't have the brackets, it would still do that. Okay, but brackets make it easier for us to make sure that we're forcing the right answer. Then this one here, if I grade equals 12 or I grade equals 11 and subject equals IT, that's going to be all grade 11s. And in actual fact, in English, we would say all grade 11s and 12s who take IT. So if you were asked a question to go all grade 11s and 12s who take IT, this is what your if statement would look like with an or between the grade 12 and the grade 11. Okay. Right, now, let's see if now that we have our chat feature back, if you guys can answer me some questions. Let's see how quick you are to fire off. So I've got C gender as a char variable. I've got I grade as an integer, and I've got S subject as a string. What would my if statement look like to say all boys in grade 10? Okay, I don't need the if and the then and all the rest of it. Just give me the conditional statement if you can. Let's see who the first one is off the mark. At least now we don't have to wait 90 seconds for an answer. Unless, of course, nobody can come up with an answer. Oh dear, you're all very quiet, hey? Ah, there we go. If S equals M, I grade equals 10. Remember, we're using and or, so you've got to put them together. So all boys in grade 10 is going to be C gender and good user, except what did you forget? But maybe it's just because you were in a hurry. You forgot about the brackets. And remember our old friend uppercase? Okay, if the user typed in a lowercase m, okay, then it's not going to recognize it as an M. So I have to say, if uppercase C gender equals M and I grade equals 10. Okay, but the important thing, the only thing I was looking for there, which you guys seem to have worked out, is that it needs to be an and. It can't be an or. Both of these have to be true. Gender must be M and grade must be 10. Okay, what about this one? This one's actually needs you to not only use, because you could have long ands, or remember what I said to you in the previous example, what we've learned already. All girls in high school. Okay, it needs you to think about what does high school mean, and then the whole girls thing. How would you tell using gender, grade, and subject if somebody is in high school? I'm only going to give you a short while to try. Don't know if I want to say maybe you've all relaxed from the long weekend. Yes, well done, Jared. Yes, you can use an in for the grade. Yes. Okay, Callum, dangerous to say if I greater than or equal to 8, but you could, yes. Okay, user, you're on the right track, but you've forgotten about how you do 8 to 12. Okay, let's have a look at it. If I grade in square brackets 8 to 12, okay, with the 2 dots between and no inverted commas because it's an integer, and uppercase C gender equals F. Okay. That's it, yes. Okay, Ruben, well done, except don't forget the brackets around the I grade in. Okay, so this is quite complicated and quite tricky to remember. Okay, but most importantly, remember your brackets. Oh, goody, the dogs are joining in today. All right, all grade 10s who don't do maths. All grade 10s who don't do maths. Maybe now you're going to use the subject. And I think if I remember correctly, I may have forgotten something in this statement, but we'll see. It's been a while since I put this together. Okay, grade equals 10 and subject not equal to 10. Good, you're close, except not 10. What is it going to be? Not equal to maths, yes. And again, don't forget those brackets, hey? Okay. And yes, I was very naughty, but I will tell you now what I've done wrong, or maybe you guys can tell me what I've left out of this if statement. So if I grade equals 10 and S subject not equal to maths, okay? Note the maths in the inverted commas. Good, Sandra. What if I, careful, grade 10 will not have inverted commas around it because it's a number. Yes, thank you, Ontatilia. I forgot about uppercase. I used it on the gender, and then I left it out over here, okay? So here I should have said, and uppercase S subject is not equal to capital maths. Okay, so very naughty. Okay, what's the difference between not and not equal to? Absolutely nothing, Ditlof. Absolutely nothing. Okay, so you can use one or the other. So this could have also been and not S subject equal to maths, would have been 100% correct. Okay, well spotted. Okay, so there are lots and lots of ways to do this. Here are some examples. Right, now we move on to our next one. Okay, we're moving quite quickly, but I see you've got questions, which is good. Would it still work if you forgot uppercase? Okay, Sandra, good question. I'm going to go back and then answer the next one as well. So, would it still work if you forgot uppercase? Only if they typed the word maths spelt exactly the same way as I did. So if somebody typed maths with a lowercase m, then my if statement would not recognize it as maths. If they typed it in capitals, all caps, they wouldn't recognize it as maths. So in order for my program to be 100% accurate, I would have to use uppercase. Okay. All right, next one. Can you get and ors in and ors? I think I understand what you're saying. In other words, can you have this and this, or this and that? I think that's what you're asking. And yes, you can. Okay. But don't get too complicated. Okay. Rather try and find other ways. Okay, uppercase, no. Uppercase will not only affect the first letter of a string. Uppercase will only work on a character. So I cannot apply uppercase to a string. Okay, ors is as in ands and ors, Sandra. Sorry, I'm getting distracted here. So Marco, to get back to you, uppercase will only work with char. Okay, you'll get an error if you try and apply uppercase to a string. And no, you cannot just uppercase just the first letter of a string. Okay. Okay, no, that's fine. All right, I think we're all on the right track here. Yes, there is such a thing called lowercase, Ruben. There's a function called lowercase. that will then force it down. So theoretically, if you wanted to, you could use lowercase instead of uppercase. Okay. All right. Alex, I don't know what you're up to, but be careful, because if you're going to post stuff that's not relevant, you could find yourself outside of the meeting. Okay. All right. There we go. Somebody's giving us proper English with the inverted commas. Excellent. Thank you. Okay, let's move on. Right, so this is a case statement. Now, a case statement is similar to a nested if statement, but it's easier to debug and code. And again, very, very important, a case statement only works with ordinal data types. Okay, only ordinal data types. So the basic structure of a case statement looks like this. It's case, variable of, then the first value, what must happen, second value, what, and you can go on, you can have 25 values if you want to, and what must happen. And then your case statement has an optional else. So you can leave the else out if you want to, and then it has an end. Please note, only an end, no begin, except if you're going to do stuff in the middle here, which I'll show you. So let's have a look. Here is an example of how you would use a case statement. Okay, so quickly somebody's asked, so I'll quickly answer. Is it similar to a for loop? The case statement? No. A case statement is similar to a nested if statement. So a case statement will still only be executed once, Detlof. Okay, so whatever it is you're doing, it's still only going to be executed once. Okay, so let's have a look what we've got here. We've got I day num gets the value of sed day dot value. So there I'm reading in my day num. Now remember, in actual fact, there's a Delphi function that does this for us, but I'm just showing it to you to show you how it works. So my case statement goes case I day num of. In other words, this is almost like an if statement that says if I day num equals, then if it's 1, then I type colon s day gets the value of Monday. So what I'm doing here in my case statement is I'm saying if I day num equals 1, then the code that I want to execute is s day must get the value of Monday. So no, it doesn't only work for the date data type K, it only works for integer and char here. Okay, so the case thing, the variable here has to be either integer or char. What it does as a result of evaluating that number can be any data type. Okay, so but only an integer or a char can go between the case and the of. So it's like in, but now I can do more than one thing. And if with an in is going to be if this number in 1 to 5, then do this, else if this number in 6 to 10, then do this, that kind of thing. Okay. Sometimes you can use the case in place of an in, Sandra. So depending on what you need, you could replace your in code with a case statement. But remember, if you've just got, let's say, for example, you want to determine if somebody's in high school. So like our previous example. Then you're just going to use the in, because you're going to go, if I grade in 8 to 12. I'm not going to use a case statement for that, because it would then only be this first case I variable in the first line. If I had a nested if statement, if we use the same example, okay, let's say, for example, I wanted to determine if somebody was in the foundation phase or in the primary school or high school, then I'm going to need a nested if statement. So my nested if statement is going to go, if I grade in 1.3, then show message you're in foundation phase. Else, if I grade in 4.7, then show message you're in primary school. Else, if I grade in 8.12, then show message you're in high school. Okay, I could turn that into a case statement, because then what I would do is I would say case I grade of, and I'll show you all the different versions of it now. 1.3 colon, show message you're in primary school. 4.7 colon, show message, and 8.12, show message. So only when you are faced with using a nested if that uses in could you turn it into a case statement. But I've got an example now that's coming that shows you the comparison between the two. Okay, so just note a couple of things to remember. Okay, these are the values that I'm checking if my variable equals. So as I said, case I day num of 1. So if I day num is 1, then I'm going to assign the value of Monday to S day. If it's 2, I'm going to put Tuesday into S day. If it's 3, I'm going to assign Wednesday to S day. So this is the same as a nested if. Depending on what the value of I day num is, I'm going to put a different value into S day. And then I have my optional else here that says else S day gets the value of invalid. So if anything other than 1 to 7 is put into I day num, then S day is going to hold invalid. Okay, Sandra, you've got, could you show us a program where case is used? Yes, I will definitely do that. Okay, I'm actually going to give you guys one to do as well. Okay, so let's have a look quickly. Here is an example of how this same case statement would end up looking as a nested if. Okay, so here I've got, sorry, I need to keep moving my chat around because now I'm filling up the screen nicely. So here would be what my nested if statement would look like for this exact same case statement. If I day num equals 1, then S day gets the value of Monday. Else, if I day num equals 2, then S day gets Tuesday, blah, 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 blah. Nice long if statement. Whereas if I've got a case statement, you can see my block's bigger. Oh, sorry, the same size, but my text is bigger because actually it's less code. And it does, in the long run, when you learn to use them, make a lot more sense. Okay. So let's move on. Let's have a look at the rules. Okay, here's some more examples that we can go through that will hopefully also give you a little bit of a better idea of what's going on here. So I've already told you that your case variables may only be ordinal data types. So this variable here can only be either an integer or a char. Okay. If it's a char, you need to put uppercase, as always, to ensure that the program is case sensitive. Case statements have an end, but no begin, and I'll explain what these two are here now. No options in the statements may be repeated. Now, what that means is if you have a look at this example here, I've got case I grade of 1 to 7 begin. So that's the same as the begin and end with an if statement. So begin, display primary school, and ink I primary. So if their grade is between 1 and 7, they're in primary school. Now, I know, obviously, logically, you guys know, but I cannot now start this one from 7. 7 cannot be repeated. Again, Delphi will give you an error. Okay. All right. Ontatili's got a question. Couldn't you also use case for, yes, you could use case for Booleans, but it's not really worth it because you've only got 2 options. So your case is for a variety of options, a nested if. Now, if you think about Boolean, you're going to go, if it's true, then this, otherwise it's that. You're not going to have a nested if for a Boolean. So there's no real point. You can, but there's no real point. But yes, you could. Okay. All right, so if we go back here, I said to you it has an end but no begin. It does have a begin and end if there's more than one thing that you want to happen if I grade is between 1 and 7. Okay, so each individual if part is going to have its own begin and end, but there's no begin that goes with this end that's linked to the case statement. Okay, so if you look here, if our grade is 1 to 7, I'm going to output primary school, and I'm going to ink my counter that is counting how many primary school learners there are. Else, output high school and ink how many high school pupils have entered the information so far. Else, show message invalid input and exit my procedure. Remember, that doesn't just exit the case statement, it will exit the entire procedure. Okay, so users asked me about why we're using ink. This is just an example. So let's say, for example, this program was to count how many primary school people had used this program so far and how many high school people had used the program. So when they are asked what grade they're in, it displays that they are in, for example, primary school, and it adds 1 to the counter that's going, okay, that's now 3 primary school people that have entered the information into this program. Next time, next person enters, they're in grade 4, it's going to display primary school, and now iPrimary is going to go up to 4 because now 4 people have used the program. So it's just a counter that's counting every time this case statement is executed, depending on whether the grade is 1 to 7 or 8 to 12. Okay. Okay, where would the 1 be added or stored? What, this 1 here for I grade? That would be your input. So in other words, you would have asked the user what grade they're in on the form. Okay, like I had in my previous example, maybe there's a spin edit on the form that says enter your grade, and that's going to be then I grade gets the value of SED grade dot value. Okay, right, let's have a look at the char example over here. This is now, wouldn't you love it if we had a multiple choice question that A and C are correct and B and D are incorrect. So you have a 50% chance of getting the right answer instead of a 25% chance with normal multiple choice questions. So here what this case statement is saying is case, uppercase C, answer of. Okay, all right, sorry, I'm going to stop because Sandra's asked me a question. I want to get to it as quickly as I can. For the adding 1 to how many primary, okay, so that's going to be stored in iPrimary. Okay, remember, ink iPrimary is the same as saying iPrimary gets the value of iPrimary plus 1. Okay, so it will go back into iPrimary. Okay, so every time this code is executed, 1 is added on to either iPrimary or iHigh, depending on what grade they're in. Okay. All right, so let's have a look at this one again. So I've got case, uppercase C, answer of. So if C answer is A or C, note again, like in inverted commas around each of them, then output correct answer and ink how many answers they have correct. So this is a wonderful multiple choice question because for every single answer, A and C are correct and B and D are incorrect. Okay, my classes mustn't think you're ever going to get it that easy, but let's have a look. If the answer is B or D, uppercased, then output incorrect answer and ink how many they've got wrong. Ink I incorrect now. Okay. Otherwise, invalid answer and ink how many invalid answers they've entered. So here, I can calculate how many questions have answered by adding these 3 numbers together, because the number of correct, the number of incorrect, and the number of invalid is going to tell me how many questions were asked in total. Okay, so note, please, remember the colon. That's how we indicate, not a colon equals. A colon is how you indicate this is what I want to happen if this is true. Okay. All right. Here's another couple of tips to note. Same examples here, but things to pay attention to. You may have a range of options that are similar to how you would code in the in operator. So you can, like I've said already, you can have 127, or you can have A, comma C. So example A to Z, but then it must have inverted commas around them. Or you can have non-consecutive values, the same as an in. So it could be 1, 3, 7 instead of here. Okay. If the case variable is an integer, no inverted commas. If it's a char, inverted commas around each individual value. And remember, if I'm dealing with a C grade that I'm looking at as a number, it's also going to have inverted commas around it. Okay, if I'm treating it as text. Okay, but we won't overcomplicate things like that right now. Okay, so here is an activity that I want you guys to try and attempt for homework. It's a very basic use or application of a case statement. You're going to have to design the interface. This is not part of the Dandelion Delphi book. This is something that I'm giving you as something simple to start off with. So we've got Lawrence runs a garden service and his rates are given in the table below. So hours per week, rate per hour. Here's what your form needs to look like. Your input is going to be how many hours Lawrence has worked. Your case statement is then going to evaluate the number of hours. If the number of hours is 1 to 2, then you're going to take whatever that number of hours is and multiply it by 250 to display how much he's going to get paid. If he's worked 3 to 4 hours, you're going to multiply the number of hours by 200 to indicate how much money he's going to be paid. And so it goes on. So your case statement is going to be based on what you read in from your spin edit here. So it's going to be case I hours of. Okay. And I've given you here a screenshot of what the form must look like. And I've also given you a screenshot of the components that you need to use. Okay, so you've got a couple of minutes, 1 or 2, to ask me questions about this particular activity if you have any. Okay, I think what I'm going to do while you phrase your questions is I'm going to go ahead and then I'll come back if I need to. Okay. Right, then here's another one. This is the gym option, and this is in the Dandelion Delphi book. Okay, it's in the same if statements folder. Okay, yes, I will go over the activity tomorrow, Jared, definitely, both of them. Okay, yes, over 9 hours would be invalid then, yes, definitely, okay. All right, and then this one here, you've got to get the height from the user, whether they are a Vitality user, or sorry, Vitality member using a checkbox. Remember we did checkboxes in a previous activity. Then you've got the formula for calculating their BMI, and then you're going to store their monthly membership cost using the constant given as follows. Now guys, here's a tip. This question cannot be used with a case statement because BMI is a real value, okay? And checking whether they're a member of Vitality or not is Boolean, but you need to check both of them. So the tip is, this activity tests multiple conditions in an if statement. It doesn't test the case statement. Okay. Oops, there's the rest of the question. Okay, there's your dialog box that shows them their full or reduced discount depending on whether they're a Vitality member or not. And then you're going to output their height, their weight, what they're paying, and what their BMI is. Okay, so this is the other part of that particular question. Again, you can get it from the Dandelion Delphi. Right, so what have we learned today? Callum, I can't remember what page it's on, but it's round about the 90s, if I remember correctly. Okay. Right, so you can have multiple conditions in an if statement using and or. That's what the gym activity is testing. Case statements are conditional statements that can be used with integers and characters. In other words, ordinal data types. Thank you, user. It's on page 67. Okay, so I was like way off. I was thinking in the 90s. Okay, so that's what we have learned for today's lesson. There are the links, as you've seen in every other lesson, for whatever it is that you may need. Remember now, we're back onto our Zoom, which makes our lives so much easier. And hopefully I will see you again tomorrow. Thank you for coming.